if you can teach your kids to turn on the flashlight and go look in the parking lot whenever they experience problems in life, instead of just looking at what the street light's shining right in front of their face, that is the greatest thing you could ever do for them. And that is the work.
Welcome to the Rising Leader Podcast, bringing forth the new wave of rising leadership and helping leaders find purpose, connection, and results. This is your host, founder of Alluviance, Alex Kremer. All right, what is up, y'all? Welcome back to the Rising Leader Podcast. This is your host, Alex Kremer. This show is going to have what we like to call a lot of riff ability. This was just coined by the amazing Mr. Chris Caldwell. So first off, what up, Chris? Good to see you, man.
What's up, man? Good to see you too. I'm excited to be here, and I can't wait to riff with you in this conversation.
You know, it's funny doing these podcasts. Like, I always prepare the introduction. I always prepare questions. We have a conversation beforehand about what we want to talk about. But I feel like every single time we hop on a conversation, we always find ourselves kind of going down the same route or being interested in the same types of things. So it's like, yeah, there's a level of over preparation for this conversation that I could have done. So I'm like, let's show up and let's talk about what we both feel a resonance with.
Yeah, that sounds good to me, man. That's for how I like to operate. I like to be prepared, but I always say be prepared and then be present. So, I'm ready. I'm ready.
Hell yeah. Well, so as a background on you, Chris, so for those who do not know, Chris is the founder and CEO of Sell As You Are. He's helping sales professionals not just become better at sales, but also really empowering people to sell from their authentic version of themselves. And he was at our last Arise Immersion and just was such an incredible pillar for so many people who were interested specifically in those two areas around being a better sales professional and just really working on kind of who you are. Other fun facts about Chris, prior to being the CEO of Sell As You Are, he was a history high school teacher for about 10 years or so, which, I could just pick your brain on so many different types of things there. And on a personal note, man, Chris, you were, we've talked about past lives when you were a Roman soldier, when you were a Native American. We've studied the art of meditation. We talked about the autobiography of a yogi together. I mean, it's like there's a lot of ooh, I really love the way that this guy thinks. So I'm glad to have you on the show, man.
Yeah, man. It's like I said, it's great to be here. And depending on where conversations go with me, they can get real weird real quick. So yeah, I feel like some of our conversations, people would put it into that category, but, I have a lot of different interests, and, I keep learning about myself and learning about life, the more I dive into these things. So, yeah, it's been awesome to connect with you over it and, dive a little deeper, at times on some of that stuff. I'm looking forward to this conversation here to see where this goes.
It's interesting too, because you have a shit ton of books behind you as well.
I do. Yes, I do.
And so you're a reader, you're a history buff. And I remember in one of our previous conversations, you're like, what, that reminds me of something in this one book. And you know exactly where that book was in your bookshelf. And I was like, that's like a lost art of people going to a bookshelf, pulling out a book and saying, check this thing out right here.
Yeah. I bring I love reading, really love reading. And I bring a highlighter and a pen. Well, I always have a highlighter and a pen in my pocket because I really like to highlight and take notes in the books. And then after I finish reading the book, then I can go back and just reread just the highlighted and the annotated parts. And it allows me to quote unquote reread a book in a half hour or 45 minutes with what I believed was really important and how it applied to my life at the time that I read it. So yeah, I have a tendency to do that pretty often. Turn around and grab a book off the shelf and be like, hold on a second. someone much wiser than me solved this problem already in a much more articulate way. Let me find it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I do very much like to read.
I feel like if somebody gives me a book and it's been highlighted by them or written in it, it's a very like intimate thing. It's
Yeah, oh
like,
yeah,
oh, when I looked at it, I'm like, oh wow, this was of resonance to Chris when he read it last time, and even put like a little note next to it. I'm like, oh, like I'm gonna get a
yeah,
true, deeper
uh-huh,
snapshot into his life.
yeah. My wife reads, a lot of the same books I read, and depending on the situation, obviously. But I always buy her a new book. I don't want her reading. I don't want her reading my book. Not because of like some type of fear of vulnerability, but I don't want to influence what she takes away from the book. So I don't want
Mm.
her to read a highlight or an annotation and be like, wait, hold on a second. Is this important? Should I be thinking more about this? I want her to be fully present and not skip to different areas of a highlight or underline or whatever it is. So I think there are, definitely two different ways of looking at it, but I totally see what you're saying. It is sort of a sneak peek into my mind and my soul, when you start reading my notes.
So I want to get into what Sell As You Are is, but before I do that, I got to keep on pulling this thread. I just want to say, like, if you went to a deserted island and you had to bring 3 books from your shelf, what 3 books would you be bringing?
Oh, jeez. See,
That's such
these are
a
the types of
that's
questions
such like a
I
classic.
need. These, well, yeah, these are the types of questions I need these ahead of time. So, like, I mean, you are just dropping a bomb on me here. Let's see. I'm trying to think of what would be most helpful to me on a deserted island. A book like 10x wouldn't be particularly helpful because me trying to 10x my, coconut allotment may not be like the most valuable thing to me. Um, I think that let's see. See now I'm turning. I hope my audio is good because I'm turning around to look at my bookshelf now. I think that A Course in Miracles would absolutely be one. Um, that would be that would be yeah, that would be one. I think the Yoga Sutras would be another one. From Yoga Sutras would be another one. And then maybe just for a nostalgic perspective, The Untethered Soul
Oh,
by Michael Singer, because that was the book that really, really began everything for me for working on, my inner game. That was my first book that significantly expanded my consciousness. So I
mm.
would probably go with those 3. I have a lot of sales and business books and like personal success books, but I probably wouldn't be bringing those to a deserted island.
It just picking those 3 books right there, I feel like says so much about you because technically you're a sales coach, you're a sales trainer, you're a
Yep.
CEO of a sales training company,
Yeah.
but you spoke so much to a deeper level of inner game, mental, emotional connection with oneself, and also Untethered Soul, by Michael Singer that's one of my also favorite
Mm.
books, and one of the reasons that I love it, it's one of those that's like, let me just flip open to any page
Yeah.
and read it, and it's gonna resonate with something that's going on with your life. You're like, man, I needed to hear this right
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a book you can put down and pick up and pick up right where you left off. And it's just so practical in its nature. Michael Singer does such a great job of teaching while he's writing. And I think that's a real art that some people have that separates a book with great content that's just a good book with great content to a potentially life-changing book, is being able to meet people where they are and speak in a language they can understand. Um, and some of Joe Dispenza's books probably would have been on my honorable mentions, and
Mm.
that's something that he's very good at. And I think Mickey Singer does that incredibly well in Untethered Soul. And when I read it, I think 7 or 8 years ago now. That's exactly what I needed, like exactly what I needed when I needed it. And I've read it a couple times since then, and every time it's a little bit different, which is great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those books that, like, as you read it, you can feel the transmission from Michael Singer coming through it. It's more than just the words that are on the page. You can feel the
There's
energy
an
of him.
energy. There's
Yeah.
an energy, man, for sure.
So that's kind of like an interesting lead in into Sell As You Are, because you were a history teacher for 10 years. You're very much into the inner game and the multiple facets of inner game, whether it be emotional, mental, spiritual, world there. But you're teaching sales.
Yep.
You're teaching both the sales expertise, the skill set, the playbooks that are necessary, the frameworks that are necessary. But you also complement that with, like, just be yourself, like be authentic and do you. And so it's not surprising that you picked those 3 books. And then that's kind of a unique flavor of how you teach sales. So I would love if you kind of expand on what Sell As You Are is, kind of what your methodology is, even, or like kind of what the true message is that you are teaching there.
Sure. So I think it might be helpful to have a little more context on my background. So you are correct in that I was a history teacher for about 10 years. I loved it. If we had about 4 more hours, I could explain to you all the different reasons why I transitioned out of a career that I loved and truly was my dream job. I was working at if I could pick one high school in the entire country to work at, I was working at that school. And I was teaching the AP classes. I was coaching the golf team, which, by the way, is an awesome gig, as you can imagine. And I was leading retreats, spiritual retreats, multiple spiritual retreats every year. And those were the best days of my year every year. And so when I left, I ended up working, catching on with the sales training company. I worked for Sandler Sales Training, which is a really big sales training company worldwide. And I worked there, and that's where I learned everything about sales training, about sales systems, what works, what doesn't work. I was blessed enough to have an individual who had been doing it for decades mentor me one-on-one for 90 minutes to 2 hours every single day. We would talk. And I mean, when you get that type of attention, personalized one-on-one attention from someone who knows that much, your skills and your development are just take off like a rocket ship. And so that's what happened with me. And then I transitioned into leading my own corporate team for a few years in the insurance industry. And then I launched Sell As You Are about 3 years ago. So I was trying to bring, I'm trying to bring those 3 very unique experiences, one in like teaching and retreat facilitation, and then the second in selling and then training, and then the third in sales leadership, and bringing it into what I can provide my clients here at Sell As You Are. And, the impetus for Sell As You Are, and what I think makes it unique is that when I was working at Sandler Training, I had all the systems, the content, the structure. I was listening to David Sandler audio on the drive to work, on the drive back. I mean, when I'm in on something, I'm all in. That's just how I operate. And so I was all in, obsessed. I memorized all the rules. I was obsessed. But that didn't change the fact that when I went to make a cold call, my hand was shaking. And as someone who did theater and then stand up and improv comedy, and then was in front of a room of a couple dozen people all day, every day for a decade, it was really strange to me that I had this severe social anxiety when it came to picking up the phone and calling someone who I've never even met before. And it hit me in that moment that there is something wrong with me. That this is what I told myself at the time. Yeah, it's not a very graceful way of speaking to oneself, but at the time, there's a realization that there is something very wrong with me that I did not know about, and it was a really scary realization. I was in a full commission sales role with a young child and a very pregnant wife. And I realized that I was not as prepared psychologically or mentally for this challenge as I thought I was. And the biggest problem is I didn't know what was wrong with me, and I didn't really have anyone who could help me fix it. And so that sort of began my journey on my inner game. Because I realized that nothing's going to change. No amount of memorizing a script or memorizing the system or even practicing the system is going to change what is going on inside my brain when I am faced with these things. And so as I dove more into that, more into psychology, more into spirituality, more into human behavior, so I could understand myself and dig myself out of the hole I was in, I began to bring that into my training and my coaching. And it began to have a huge impact on people. And what I began to notice is many of my clients in the sales and sales leadership arenas were struggling with all the same things I was struggling with. It just may not have manifested itself as acutely as it did for me, as quickly. And so when I started incorporating all these things I was learning and things that were changing my life, it started to have an enormous impact on them. But that was outside of the content of what I was supposed to be training on. So at Fell As You Are, I and my team are very intentional about incorporating these types of psychological principles, driving conscious awareness around who we are and how we're showing up, and what behaviors and circumstances are getting us off track, causing wobble within us. And then what stories we're telling ourselves that are, continuing to sort of throw gas on that fire. So we have a system, is a 6-step system. It's a framework we use for all of our B2B consultative sales professionals. And I'm very biased, but I think it's awesome. But what we really focus on is within the practical execution of the system, right? In order for you to show up as best you can in the role of sales professional, you have to show up as the best version of you. And that is focused on 3 pillars, and that is courage, truth, and authenticity. And if you can really lean in to those 3 values, and you combine that with what I think is a very effective system and coaching from me or a member of my team, then the sky's the limit for you.
Courage, truth, and authenticity. And it's like when you put those in a melting pot and then you sprinkle in on top of that the craft of sales, the skill set, the playbooks, it's a sacred combination right there.
Yeah.
I would love to just kind of dive into, I feel like authenticity for the most part is generally, understood. The courage and the truth, though, I would love for you to expand on those 2 pillars right there.
Sure. What I've found is interestingly, not to say that I wholly disagree with you, but I have found that authenticity, people think they understand it, but they really don't. And I don't say that as a slight to anyone. I say that as a reflection on my own journey, because I did not fully understand it. And I say courage, truth, and authenticity, and I say it in that order because I think the quickest way to understand your authentic self is summoning the courage to always tell the truth. And when you summon the courage to always tell the truth, and that's just not just in questions people ask you, but in everything you do, right? Not auditing what you wear because of what someone might think. Not auditing what you do because of what someone might think, but to be able to summon the courage to tell the truth to yourself first, and then to show up as that in your life, in everything you do, and in the energy you bring, and the way you meet people, and the way you treat people, that will bring out your authentic self. It is, from my perspective, the simplest way to express to someone what their truest authenticity is if you had every moment of your life, you summoned the courage to always tell the truth about who you are, what you care about, what's important to you, and how you feel about yourself and other people, then you will begin to tap in to your truest authenticity. And, those things that you mentioned at the beginning of this call, the past lives stuff, the autobiography of a yogi, like that stuff, I'm really, really into that stuff, like really into it. And for years, I was scared to death to tell people that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I am still on a journey to my authentic self. Right. And that comes through continuing every day to summon the courage to tell the truth about who I am and what I care about and what I'm passionate about, and just like embracing the weirdness, of like, of the fact that I went to a Fall Out Boy concert last night. And when I got home, I sat down and read The Dark Night of the Soul for a half hour before going to bed. And like, that's what, like, I don't know. It's a weird combination, but that's me.
I think the authenticity, I'm glad you kind of push back of people don't all know what that truly means. And I think when we say, oh, just be your authentic self, the problem that I see today is very few people actually know what their authentic self actually is. And they're not even aware of it, because it's like, you join, essentially you're indoctrinated from a tiny kid to put on this version of yourself that is achieving, that looks good, that has a good image, that's intelligent, that's popular, that makes a lot of money as you grow up, that, I have to get this great job and put it on my LinkedIn, and my Instagram followers need to go up to this, all this sort of stuff to try to make everybody else think that person's doing great. Look how awesome they are. They're succeeding, whatever that might be.
Yep.
But underlying all of that is this like part of us that very few, I think, actually nurture this unique expression of ourselves, the weirdness of ourselves. I love the example of the Fall Out Boy to reading Dark Night of the Soul. It's like, what's that thing that's actually different?
Yeah.
That's actually weird, that other people would be like, I wasn't expecting that from you.
Yeah.
And having the courage to say, you know what? Like, I am different as hell. And I like things that most people don't like. I'm actually taking a path, even in my career or the type of a relationship that I have, that very few people choose to do, but to have the courage to actually go down that route. First step, it takes awareness. But then second step, it's like, are you then doing the work to figure out, okay, if I'm not this image that I'm actually trying to put on, what am I?
Yeah.
That's a scary question.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And I would be foolish to say that I know that for me. Because there has never been a time in my life that I actually know as much as I think I know. Because the more I learn, the more I've realized how Chris from a year ago really didn't know anything about anything. He knew more than Chris from 3 years ago. But so I don't pretend, there's a good chance 5 years from now, you and I could be having a conversation about authenticity. And I could say like, man, Alex, remember that time we did that podcast? I was telling you, like, I truly understood authenticity. Like, man, like I had no idea what I was talking about. And I think that is, but that truly to me, like that encompasses the energy of what it means to be authentic. What it means to be authentic is to be on the path, is to be genuinely trying to figure out what is my authentic self. That is in its truest sense, authenticity. Is that doing that work? And the ego is extremely clever, and it knows you better than you know yourself oftentimes. And so I see people fall into the trap of using this idea of being authentic just to be rude or to be blunt or to be inconsiderate. But well, I'm just telling you, I'm just being authentic, you know. And it's like, no, you're actually hiding behind working on this trigger that you have right here with that phrase of being authentic, right? And so, what is it? The best I can describe it in my life on my journey is the courage to tell the truth. And that includes, you know, when I have a meeting with myself in meditation, to be able to tell the truth to myself, and to be able to look in the areas I don't want to look. And that action is the most aligned, authentic feelings that I experience, is when I am truly a student of myself.
You said something in that I just want to like double down on, I think was like very profound. Authenticity isn't a destination per se. It's a journey, and simply choosing and committing to do the work on yourself to say, who am I actually? When I take all these layers off, this baggage, this image off, who am I actually inside? And how can I actually have that part of me start to come out, start to kind of shine through? And just the mere fact that, you know, and there's so many different ways to do the work. And I use air quotations as I say that. That could be meditation. It could be breath work. It could be cold plunges. It could be going to retreats. It could be having a therapist. It could be being in a conscious relationship. Like, there's so many different modalities, but it's simply, did you choose to do the work? And I think there's a gap today. People are scared to do the work.
Yes.
People are hesitant. People are like, yeah, I see people like diving in and learning about this. Like, I don't know if I'm ready for that yet.
Yep.
What do you, I guess I'm curious, like, what do you think is actually preventing people from doing the work, from diving in right there?
Sure. Yeah. It's scary. That's what, it's it's not dangerous though. And that there's a big difference. We often get those two things confused. It is scary, right? But I mean, honestly, like anything that will truly change you is scary. So it's the same reason why the adult, you know, doesn't want to learn to swim, even though they live 10 minutes from the beach, right? Because it's scary. Like it's easier. We convince ourselves it's easier not to, and maybe it is easier not to, but it's not as fulfilling. And it's not as real. But I think more than anything, we get into and are programmed by society, by our parents, by teachers, by bosses, by our friend group, right? Especially, like, the social impact is hugely understated, in my opinion. Having children myself, and seeing the impact the things that their friends say have on them, I never quite realized how big of a factor that was probably for me. But my point in saying all that is, we are trained to not look. Like, we're actually taught not to look. And because of that, it is not a skill that we have developed. And so it is very scary to do something that you really are out of practice with, and then have that practice bring up things that maybe you don't want to face. And there's a lot of guilt and shame in our society, and it triggers a lot of that stuff too.
What do you mean when we're trained not to look?
Well, we're trained not to look because so for example, I've had numerous conversations with friends and or family members in which I am talking about something really real, like viscerally real, like a conflict that we had, a mistake that I made, and an issue that's been lingering, addressing the elephant in the room. And I'm doing it in a nurturing and calm and compassionate way. And some of them receive it well. Others are wholly uncomfortable with the depth of conversation I'm attempting to have, the realness, the visceral presence I'm trying to bring to our conversation. They are very uncomfortable with it. And that when I mean we are not trained as in, so for example, a member of the retreat that you hosted, which was awesome, by the way, and if you're listening to this, I would highly recommend signing up for the next Illuvians retreat with Alex and his team. One of the members of one of the attendees was telling me he's a young father like myself, and he was telling me, I want to teach my children to be able to do X, Y, and Z and achieve and believe this and achieve this and all of that. And I told him, I said, man, that is fantastic, and like I can see you light up when you talk about it, but maybe consider teaching your kids how to go deep with themselves. Like instead of achieving this, believing that, because maybe they're not set up to have those belief systems that have been valuable for you. Maybe that's not the karma they're trying to work through or why they're here. But you know, it's the spotlight effect. Have you ever heard the spotlight effect in psychology? It goes from like an old Sufi story. So it's the you know, a quick story. There's a drunk guy outside the bar at 2 a.m., right? And a cop walks up to him. The cop's trying to, you know, get people home and everything. And he was like, hey, buddy, like, what can I help you with? And the guy's like, man, I lost my keys. Like, I need my keys to get into my apartment. I need to call a ride. I need to get a ride, but I can't find them anywhere. And the cop is like, all right, man, hey, that's what I'm here for. I'm going to help you find your keys. All right, buddy, I'm going to help you get home safe. Oh, thank you, officer. So they spent about 5 minutes looking around. The officer's like, I don't see them anywhere. Like, are you sure you dropped them here? And the guy said, no, I think I dropped them over in the parking lot. And the cop looked at him sideways, recognizing he was inebriated, but looked at him sideways and said, well, then why the heck are we looking right here? And the guy said, because this is where the street light is. And the cop said, you know what, buddy? I got a flashlight. Let's go look in the dark parking lot. Because that's where the answer, that's where the solution to this problem actually is. And so what I told that individual was, if you can teach your kids to turn on the flashlight and go look in the parking lot whenever they experience problems in life, instead of just looking at what the street light's shining right in front of their face, that is the greatest thing you could ever do for them. And that is the work. But it's scary to look in that parking lot because it's dark and you may never find it. And you may be wrong. You know, you may convince yourself the answer isn't there, but it's there. And the reality is sometimes we are that inebriated guy at 2 a.m. who really isn't able to do it on his own and really wouldn't be able to do it effectively. And so what I really needed that I had to provide for myself was I needed somebody with a flashlight to sort of walk me into the parking lot, shine the flashlight for me and with me to help me find it. And I think that, you know, going back, referencing the immersions that you do at Illuvians, I think that what you're doing is you are saying like, hey, I don't know where the solution to your problem is. I'm not even sure exactly what your keys look like, right? Because your keychain's uniquely yours. But you know what, man? I got a flashlight, and I'm willing to walk over there with you. If you really want to find it, I'm willing to walk over there with you and shine in the light on the areas you need to look at. And then we'll see, maybe we find it together, or maybe you just totally find it on your own.
First off, I love that story. I mean, I felt the power in that story right there. And you know what I think that policeman also provided to that person when they went into that dark parking lot is, I got you, bro.
Yeah.
Like, you're safe. Like, you know, you don't need to be searching for this on your own, especially if it's really dark in there, especially if you have no idea where you are, especially if you don't even remember if you've ever even been there before. Like, I'm there with you.
Yep.
And I think that's the power of, whether it be a coach or a therapist, that's the power in doing it at a retreat or in a container with other people who are also willing to go there. Like there's we use the word container so often just to describe a place where you can drop in and actually feel safe to go there. The darkness also is very interesting. I'm actually going to compare it to something I've been doing in my meditation practice here.
Okay.
So often in my meditation practice, I scan from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet, bottom of my feet to my top of my head, feel the sensations all in my body. And I would do it on the outside. And so I'd scan to the front of my heart, and certain times my heart would feel good, certain times it'd be clogged, whatever it might be. And for some reason, I got a ping to actually start to scan my body from the inside. And so when I went to my heart, as opposed to feeling just simply the front of my heart, I actually started scanning like the back. And I actually, I scanned down to the bottom back corner of my heart. And I'd never actually been there before.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very interesting feeling. And the only way I can describe it, because I'm deep in this meditative state, is there was like, you ever eaten a gizzard on a turkey?
I have not.
Like, it's like, it's a very mineral tasting sort of thing. But you can tell it's like, man, there's nutrition in this. This is healthy.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, it's like that. Yeah, that's what it felt like when I went there. And I was like, oh my God, there's so many parts in this area, so many sensations, so many feelings, so much stuff that if I just am simply not like trying to figure out what is going back here, but simply just like sitting with that part of my heart. I was like, oh, wow. It like opened up a whole new door for me to even be able to ask that question, tying back to like, who am I? What's the authentic version of me?
Yep. Yeah. I love that, man. Good for you. Keep going. Keep exploring.
So I guess I want to tie this back in here because we've talked a lot about authenticity, that courage, that truth, doing the work on yourself. What does this have to do with leadership and sales? Because at the end of the day, when you're a leader or in sales, you're measured in a specific type of way.
Yeah.
Right. And oftentimes it's revenue, it's growth,
sure.
it's an external metric, KPI that you're measured on. We're talking all about the inner work here.
Mm-hmm. Yep. For sure.
So tie this together for me, if you would.
Yeah, I think that, and it has everything to do with sales, like everything to do with sales. And I had an opportunity when I first launched my business to not go back into the sales arena. I was able to accumulate quite quickly a significant significant enough for me to start growing my business just purely on executive coaching and spiritual coaching. Like that was it, just one-on-one. And I could have scaled it in that direction. But there's something that kept calling me back to sales. And that's because, in Adlerian psychology, they talk about how the root of every single fear you have in life is interpersonal conflict. And that certainly has rang true in my life. Even if there isn't another person in the actual conflict you're experiencing, you're typically experiencing the conflict through the context of what other people would do, say, or think about what you're about to do. Right? And so there's, and everything is relative to what other people do. So other people are involved in every conflict you have, which is tied to every fear that manifests itself, according to Alfred Adler. So nothing seems to be more important than the arena of sales, in which the job is interpersonal conflict. Like that is the job. And in sales, what you're trying to do is you're trying to inspire someone and coach them through making a change. And people don't like change. And change is scary and change is hard. Some people are more used to it than others. And so when you're trying to get someone to make a change and you're trying to convince them, if you believe the change is good for them, obviously, and they can afford it, and you're trying to convince them, summon the courage to do it, you can do it. Like, let's do it, and grounding them in where they are and where they want to be. It's very difficult to do that if you are not willing to change yourself. Because everything we do, we project out into the world. So if you are the same version of yourself as 15 years ago, and you have changed very, very seldom in your life, personally or professionally, grown, evolved, reconsidered your old stances and opinions on things, explored the levels of consciousness within you, whatever it would look like or be, you will be very hard pressed to be maximally effective at helping other people embrace the scary process of changing. The more I have changed and the more I have embraced change within myself, the more confidently and the more conviction I am able to bring into a conversation with someone else about how much this change we are considering is going to impact their life. And I was having a conversation literally this morning right before hopping on this podcast in which I was talking to a sales leader, and we're talking about big changes, and it's scary for him. And the conversation we were having didn't come from the energy I was bringing to talking to him about the change. Didn't have anything to do with me wanting to close the deal or, make money off of it or whatever it was. The energy I was bringing came from someone who has experienced massive change. And I believe in every cell of my body, the power, personal and professional power of being able to take that flashlight and go into that dark parking lot and to change the way you're doing things and to be focused and intentional while doing it. And that's the energy I was able to bring to him in that moment when, honestly, he needed to hear it because it was scaring him. The amount of change we're considering implementing was really scary. Exciting, really exciting, but scary. And so I think he needed that. And it's just, you just can't separate the two. You really can't. And as you know, Alex, every single human that we interact with is nothing more than a mirror of who we are. As Haridas Baba said, if a pickpocket came upon a saint, all he would see are his pockets. And so whatever is inside of us is exactly what we see inside other people. So if we believe ourselves to be people who speak with truth, who summon the courage to embrace change and to do hard things and to lead with our authenticity and our love and our genuine desire to impact other people in a positive way, we will believe that in other people and we will see it in them. And by the way, that is what their soul desperately wants someone in their life to see in them. That I can do this. I can embrace change. I can do scary things. And I am worthy of investing in myself or my business in this way. Because damn it, I can do it. They just want somebody to see that in them. And it's really difficult to see that in other people if you don't see it in yourself.
Yes. That, I feel like I could listen to like that whole thing that you just said like 20 times.
Yeah, I should probably record that and listen to it myself sometimes too.
that was truly powerful. And I, as you said it, not only did I feel the truth in it, I felt it in so many different types of ways. Specifically, I brought it back to this one time I was working with this one person. I was considering buying a part of his business. And it didn't end up going through. And one of the reasons at the very end, he looked at me, he's like, Alex, you better not fuck me on this.
Yeah.
And I was like, first off, I would never do that. And second, if that's what you think I'm going to do, is that simply a reflection of, are you trying to fuck me? Like, are you trying to like it just brought up, again, that your outer world is simply a reflection of your inner world. And if you're not willing to do the change and to come from that, how can you even think about being in integrity with asking other people to do that themselves?
Yeah. Yeah. And that guy, like in that moment, he may not have been trying to fuck you over in that specific deal. But what that showed is that maybe if the roles were reversed, that's what he would be considering doing. And so he immediately projected that into your motivations. Because if the roles were reversed, he could see himself considering something like that. And we just don't really realize that we actually see other people as ourselves. As Ram Dass would say, everyone else is just God in drag. So, it's just like we all just look a little bit different. We're all just dressed up in our costumes, but we're all just a mirror to ourselves. So like if you're in sales and people are lying to you and people are avoiding you and you're not able to close the deal, and all the things we would project onto the prospect are just all of our own problems. Like the thing about sales is you can, like going back to that question you asked me of like, how do we tie this into sales? Like, let's get maybe more specific and more practical. The amazing thing about sales, and the reason I am very passionate about it, is because sales is one of, if not the only industry, entrepreneurship, I'm sure you could put into that too, that you can wake up and do something that scares the shit out of you every single day. And in fact, the more things you do that scare the shit out of you on a daily basis, the better you will be at your job. If you're an accountant, you have very limited opportunities to do something that genuinely puts you outside your comfort zone and scares you and makes you face yourself and your own stories and your self-worthiness and your ability to overcome your emotions. You have a normal job, normal, quote unquote. And I don't even know what that means. So I should probably redact that. But if you have a job like an accountant, right? Like you can, oh my gosh, you can do the work. You can be a self-realized CPA by the age of 40. I have no idea, right? But your job itself does not provide the arena for you to do that at such a rapid pace like sales does. Because you can do something that scares you every single day. You can call that CEO. You can ask that one more question in a discovery call. You can put your foot down. You can refuse to negotiate, right, on your price. Like you can wake up and you can make those 100 cold calls before 9 a.m. to see if you can catch someone in the office early, knowing that they'll probably be annoyed when they pick up the phone. Like you can do something every single day that scares you. And when you're able to do something every single day that scares you, you're able to learn so much about yourself so freaking quickly that it's just like, man, like sales was rocket fuel to my spiritual development. And on paper, it seems like it makes no sense that someone would say that. But that's sort of the reality of it. And I believe you can embrace that in everything, in all your relationships. All your relationships are opportunities to polish your mirror. And the great thing about sales is you have dozens of relationships like that you check in on basically every day.
Yes, sales is scary as shit. Yeah, I love that. You get to do something hard or difficult or challenging every day.
And the more you do it, the better you are. That's the crazy thing. Like, it's not like it, like actually there's a real tangible reward to it also, which cherry on top.
when you're continuously doing the hard stuff, you actually build a different level of trust with yourself that when something hard comes up, you say, I'm actually someone who does hard things consistently. I follow through on it. Like you're building that character within yourself. So I have one more question here for you, Chris. Before I give you that question, though, I just want to acknowledge you, man. Like you're the truth that you speak, the energy that you bring, how you share it, how you teach it. It's potent, man, and it's something that I think the world needs to hear more of. And one of the things that I respect so much about you is just like you kind of said here, you're sharing it and teaching to others, but you're first doing the work yourself. You're wanting to embody it. You're challenging yourself, and that's such a great representation of what a true leader is. At the end of the day, is they do the work themselves. So thank you for that. And my last question is this: the show is called the Rising Leader Podcast.
Yep.
I'm curious, what do you view as the rising leader?
To me, when I think of rising leader, the first word that pops into my head is integration. And it's someone who's able to integrate because we haven't talked about like practical sales at all in this conversation, which perfectly fine with me. I do that all day, every day. So, but when you show up as a leader in an organization, as an owner of a company like myself, there are real practical roles and responsibilities that you need to play, right? Like you said, revenue targets, right? Certain behaviors and metrics and tracking, systems that you have to create. Those things are all really important, right? Because the chop wood, carry water, right? Like before enlightenment, you chop wood and you carry water. After enlightenment, you chop wood and carry water. Like the things that need to get done, no matter your level of consciousness. For me, like what truly a rising leader is, especially within this environment that we live in now, is someone who does all of those things and has pride in all of those things, the practical responsibilities of the role, and provide for other people what their soul needs from them, which is the ability to be honest, the ability to be vulnerable, the ability to have grace with themselves, because grace meets you where you are, but never leaves you how it found you. And as a leader, if you're able to be the example of that and actually encourage that, like, yeah, I'm measuring you on all these metrics because I'm the CRO and you're the account executive. And you're an account executive named Sarah. And like, I want to know about Sarah too. And I want to know what Sarah's afraid of. And I want to know how I can show up better to make Sarah feel more comfortable to be Sarah. Holding that flashlight for people and going into that parking lot. I think for me, like that is the rising leader. But like we've talked about, you can only do it for others to the extent that you do it for yourself. And the things I do for me, the work, quote unquote, that I do for me, honestly, I don't do it just so I can teach other people. I do it because I fucking love it. Like straight up. It's very selfish. I love it. I love it. It lights me the fuck up. And it just so happens that I am then able to pay that forward. But here's the thing. I didn't always love it. I knew I needed to do it, but it was really hard at first and it was really painful. And the more I was able to develop the disciplines for it, the more I've fallen in love with it. And so I think that is the rising leader, the person who teaches someone to chop their wood and carry their water and to do it really well, because we live in a society with responsibilities, and to also be able to teach them that this is the role you're playing here. This ain't what we're here for. It's way more than this. And let's use this as a vehicle to continuing to grow and expand each other. Right?
Mm. It's powerful, man. So powerful. So thank you so much for being here, Chris. I got a final ask for you. If people are just like, yo, who is this Chris guy? How do I get a hold of him? I want to hear more about Sell As You Are. I want to just talk to him about his previous lives. What is the best way for people to get a hold of you?
The best way would be to, sellasyoure.com, FELLASYOUARE.com is our website. You can learn more about our business there, what we do, how we do it. And then you can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Caldwell. I think my Instagram handle is @SellAsYouAre. Same, Facebook. Chris@sellasyoure.com is my email. So those are all the different ways, Chris, I guess. You can use the Google machine. You can find me.
Pick your path.
Yeah, exactly. Choose your own adventure.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, Chris, thank you so much, man. Thank you for giving your wisdom. And for all those who listen to this show, I know you're thinking of one person who's like, I gotta send this to them. So right after this episode, make sure you send it a lot to them. So Chris, thank you again, my friend.
Of course. Absolutely, Alex. Great chatting.
Thanks for listening to the Rising Leader Podcast. Make sure you hit that follow button so you get notified every time a new episode releases. If you know someone who wants to take their lives and their career to the next level, send them this episode so we can all rise together. For more information, check out alluviance.co. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime, keep letting it flow.